Hi Janella, this is Miss Backfish, and you asked me a question about how do you know when things add up to 360 versus when they add up to 180. Uh-oh, I need to turn this, sorry. Okay, let me turn this, and that should be better. Okay, sort of. Oh my goodness, now it's double. Well, that's just fun. Alright, we're going to start this and try again. Hi Janella, this is Miss Backfish, and you asked a really good question. How do I know when things add up to 180 versus when they add up to 360? Well, a triangle, if you have a triangle, the angles in a triangle, all three angles in a triangle, let me see if I can focus this a little better. Those have to add up to 180. But I don't think that's what you're talking about. I think you're talking about specifically, like these angles would add up to 180. That's always true for every triangle. But I think you're saying with quadrilaterals, with four-sided figures, when do things add up to 180 versus when do they add up to 360? Okay, well, when you have a quadrilateral, any quadrilateral at all, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It could be a square, it could be a rectangle. If you have a four-sided figure, any four-sided figure, which means quadrilateral, then all four angles, all four angles have to add up to 360. Like in a triangle that's 180, you can think of a quadrilateral, a four-sided figure, as being like two triangles put together. If you just draw one line across it somewhere, you'll get two triangles, okay? So that's like this is 180 and this is 180. So together that's 360. So I'm talking about angles 1, 2, 3, and 4 here would have to add up to 360. These four angles would have to add up to 360. These four angles would have to add up to 360. All four angles in every quadrilateral add up to 360. And if you forget what they add up to, my advice is think about a square or rectangle. Pretend mine looks a little bit more square or rectangle, because those both have four right angles. And that means 90 four times. And what's 90 times 4? It's 360. Okay, so that can help you remember if you forget. So in a rectangle, you have four 90-degree angles. In this figure here, you wouldn't have 90-degree angles. They could be lots of different things, but they would still add up all to 360. This is just a way to remember that 360 is that target number. Okay, so it could be a trapezoid, it could be anything with four sides, and all the angles will add up to 360. Like if I knew this was 92, and this was 87, and this was 128, and I wanted to know this angle, I should have found my calculator before this. I did. There it is. Then I would just add up those those three, the 92 plus the 87 plus the 128, and then subtract that from 360. And so my last angle here, the x, that's 53 degrees. Okay, so then when have we been talking about 180? Well, this is just true for general quadrilaterals. It's true for squares and trapezoids and kites and rectangles and rhombi and any kind of quadrilateral. Okay? Now, one property of parallelograms, though, is that consecutive angles, two that are next to each other. So if I know this is parallel and this is parallel, so it's a parallelogram, then any two consecutive angles, like this angle and this angle, any two that are next to each other add up to 180. And the reason that's true is because it's just like if we had two parallel lines crossed by a transversal. Remember when we studied, we had a whole chapter on that where we talked about alternate interior angles and alternate exterior and all those. Well, these are same side interior, which we also call consecutive interior. So that's what these are, consecutive interior angles, because these are parallel. And I could turn it sideways, and talk about how these are parallel, and let's pick a different color and ignore the orange and say, okay, this is parallel to this, so these two are consecutive interior angles. So like if this was 60, this would have to be 120 because these two have to add up to 180. So in every parallelogram you can go all the way around the angles like that. Like any two angles that are next to each other have to add up to 180. So let's say I have a parallelogram, and this is 115 degrees. Well, remember the other rule was that opposite angles have to be the same. So if this is 115, this is 115. And then if consecutive angles have to be supplementary, that means these two have to add up to 180, or these two, this is not really a mathematical symbol, I'm just showing you, or these two, any angle and its neighbor, not across through the middle, but like along the same side, they have to add up to 180. So 180 minus 115 is 65, so this would be 65, and this would be 65. Now another time you have consecutive interior angles, this is a parallelogram, remember, is if you have, and it's, well, you don't really have to worry about that much with rectangles and squares because they're all 90, right? But for a rhombus, that's true too, because a rhombus is a parallelogram. But another thing that's not a parallelogram is a trapezoid. A trapezoid only has one pair of parallel sides. But that still works just like you have two parallel lines crossed by a transversal. In other words, these two angles here would have to be 180. Or these two angles here, like this one and this one, those two have to add up to 180. So consecutive interior angles always have to add up to 180. And consecutive interiors show up when we have like parallel lines. Okay? They're angles next to each other. And it's the whole, all the angles added up. Like here, if I added up all four of these, I would get 360. And here too, like if I had, I don't know, 92 here and 87 here. And then these could be like, let's see, 92, 87, I want to make them good numbers. That leaves me, remember all four angles have to add up to 360, so I took 92 of 87 out of 360. These two would have to add up to 181. What? Oh, I didn't, that's really brilliant. Sorry about that. I didn't make these add up to 180. They have to add up to 180. There we go. Now they do. They add up to 180. And then these two have to add up to 180. They could be like, oh no, let's call it 50 and 130. So this is a trapezoid. So in a trapezoid, consecutive interior angles have to add up to 180. In a parallelogram, consecutive interior angles have to add up to 180. And it's only looking at the whole quadrilateral, like all four angles. And that's true for this one, or kites, or any of them. All four angles of a quadrilateral have to add up to 360. I hope this answered your question and explained what it was that you were puzzled on. Feel free to let me know if it did not. Okay? I'll talk to you later.